CII Delhi. And this is the second revolution. This is the second maybe during the Industry 4.0 revolution. The recovery is going to be digital. So that's the reason why I call the digital revolution. The digital revolution in a way was underway even before COVID-19, friends. But the pandemic has turbocharged the pace of that digital change. And this transformation is preceded by change. Change was happening, but it is now transformative and quite exponential. As spoken by other fellow guests and speakers, online transactions and payments shot up during this pandemic, and more so in India, given the sheer numbers. I will give you, according to a McKinsey survey, companies around the world have accelerated digital and digitalization by 3 to 4 years. And some of them are still fighting to digitize their records and digitize their operations and digitize before they digitalize and leapfrog into the next level. And by the way, with the Internet of Things, semiconductor chips have spread from computers and smartphones to cars and home appliances. So everywhere it is all pervasive. Just as globalization drove this decades of economic growth around the world, I believe the fast growing digital economy can propel us to a better future, to a better and a new future. In a huge country like ours, particularly, the potential for digital is tremendous, as spoken by everyone. Our digital economy is projected to grow threefold by 2025. Investment in technology remains strong despite the headwinds. Consumer demand is growing rapidly, and which is boosted by an expanding middle class and a fast-growing internet population. This summit is timely in bringing together governments and industry players and development sector players from all over the country and people around the world to maybe what we may say redefining technology or reimagining technology for a better and inclusive future. I also like to, at this juncture, warmly welcome other people, panelists who have just joined, and I could see some of them from many other parts of the country, and especially the first session participants who are joining this summit, and also the people from government and academia who are joining, including the people from development sector. A warm welcome. Digital technology, friends, has redefined the way we work, live, and play. In turn, COVID-19 has accelerated the adoption of technology beyond the wildest dream of many of us, many CEOs or CTOs for that matter. But the question before us is how we can collectively redefine digital technology in a way that will lead to a better future. The key word which I wanted to say here, friends, is unlocking the full potential of digital needs a different mindset and different set of thinking and a culture. Many of the possibilities offered by the digital revolution which we see today, and there are plenty, can be within reach of all of us. If each of us pursue them with our best effort, we can safely leave these pursuits to the grit, our resourcefulness, and ingenuity of companies, professionals, entrepreneurs, and people who are wanting to get into the workforce. But unlocking the full potential of this digital goes beyond our individual efforts. Some possibilities can be realized through collective action. And what all action? What are some of these areas? Let me highlight one or two or three. One very important, the first thing which I would like to say is called intelligent and smart automation. This is a big exercise for organizations around the world to decode, to really understand where, what, and how. It needs a discussion, and I'm sure we're going to have the panel where we discuss and unpack or unravel the mystery behind this. So smart automation, secure, seamless, and user-centric data flows is going to be another big challenge around the world. Where to get the data from, what quality of data, and what reliability and validity of data, and safety security issues remain, as spoken by the speakers. I know the clock is ticking 11, and I'm going to wrap up fast because I don't want to touch all the technical areas here because we have a power-packed panel. So the first area, friends, of collective action for all of us as professionals here is how we can enable a secure and a seamless digital transaction, digital workflow, digital manufacturing, digital production, digital everything, DX, as I said, digital experience, or as more individuals and companies go online. For example, many of us are now used to going online for our needs of making everyday payments, like from grocery to food to banking, everything is in your mobile. So increasingly, we are looking at more complex digital transactions and involving pulling information from multiple sources and interfacing with multiple parties. Again, not easy and also challenging. Each company, government, and institution often has its own system, isn't it? In fact, most operate multiple systems, as in organizations. This is also to really understand that how do we really make the best possible use, and how do we really create the right architecture, right integration within the organizations, so that we don't land up burning money, wasting time, but at the same time, we can create, capture, and deliver value in the real time. So enabling such a secure and a seamless flow of data in a manner that is user-centric, customer-centric, digital-first, customer-first mindset would be key to unlocking the full potential of the digital. India Inc., as you know, has launched several initiatives like Jan Dhan Aadhaar Mobile, some of the really path-breaking initiatives after the launch of Digital India. And I was part of that day when the Digital India was launched in Vigyan Bhavan, part of the ease of doing business, been there for as a member on that task force. I've seen 18,000 reforms, small reforms have been done. And most of them was possible because it was digital and e-governance and e-initiatives, which was paved the way for creating seamless reforms. So friends, digitally connected world, we live in a world which is digitally connected. I have highlighted on how we are seeking to realize this potential of secure and seamless digital experiences and transactions in the way we work and live. But in a much more interconnected world, the potential is even greater across our borders, creating impact through value chain integration, digital interaction across border. Since global rules for the trading of goods and services were established after the Second World War, the global economy has grown at an unprecedented scale. As digital trade drives economic recovery now, and the next wave of global growth, we will need greater collaboration to harmonize these standards and enable the trusted flow of data across the borders. And we have GDPR now coming in, as we know. But without global rules for the digital economy, geographical boundaries could easily become those barriers for what could be a virtually unlimited kind of a digital world. So developing such rules will be very, very important. There is also a need to develop new approaches for emerging aspects of cross-border digital economy, because I'm very happy that our Prime Minister and leadership is very progressive on creating India as a digital powerhouse, and which is already there because we have the biggest talent of the world in the IT sector is from India, such as the application of digital entities in cross-border transactions will be needed in the times to come. In the end, India is proud to have digital economy at the back of a massive Digital India mission. And so many investments we see are happening, which are going to propel innovation, including incentives, and also investing for a better tomorrow. The other area before I end is that I would like to highlight is the importance of investing for the future for a better tomorrow. The digital revolution that we experience today is powered by technologies that we had patiently invested over the years. Artificial intelligence, for example, has been in development since 1980s, and much before, of course. A major milestone came in 1997 when Deep Blue became the first chess-playing computer to defeat a reigning world champion. But it was not until the last 5 to 10 years that we began to truly harness the potential of artificial intelligence. So as we leverage the AI, Internet of Things, 5G to power today's digital revolution, we must continue to invest patient capital for new game changers in the next bound of growth. During this global recession, of the biggest recession and disruption of the century, it is understandable that investments for long-term would come under pressure. But we should resist these pressures, as sustained investment in science and technology is equally critical to support innovation. Happily, we as a country has taken many holistic strides in this space, and I won't like to touch on those areas because that will take more time. And for example, but India has continued to stay the course by enhancing our investments in research and development. Most of the multinationals, global players in the country today are having their offices in India for global research and development. And we have panelists who will agree with me, and over the few minutes, we'll talk about it. Over the next few years, we'll be investing heavily in research and innovation as a country, an enterprise, which includes strong focus on digital technology. So that's a big, big piece of the discussion. We have already started building deeper capabilities in areas such as quantum and blockchain technologies that are going to change, edge computing, blockchain, all of them. Another critical area in is digital communication. 5G networks are being rolled out and are expected to cover 1/3 of the world population by 2025. So we will need to look at it ahead at the next bound in a different way. The R&D is emerging technology as an emerging technology in the emerging technology space. To address the problems of this area, we have to be far more significantly thinking differently, and we have seen the kind of resources that India and scientists around the world are committing to develop vaccines in almost real time. In a normal time, vaccine takes 10 years, but the vaccines have taken now 1 year. We have the vaccine in time. The only thing is to how do we really vaccinate the entire population around the world, especially in India, which is a large country. So just like COVID-19 virus, science knows no boundaries. While each of us can pursue research and innovation excellence individually, our efforts are greatly multiplied when we work together. So friends, as we leapfrog, we must look to build international partnerships, ecosystems, strengthen collaboration, strengthen our startups. We have a panel on the startups also coming up, which is cutting edge technology startups doing some great work. So during this pandemic, we have witnessed everything which has kind of shaken us and given us also a positive momentum of collaboration in the fight against COVID-19. And perhaps we have redoubled our efforts to strengthen global partnership in R&D also. Only by working together, we can multiply the impact of science and technology to build a better world for tomorrow. Let's build a more inclusive digital future, because the forces of technology can propel the next wave for global growth and lift us out of the worst recession in the country. But its task is not easy. Redefining technology for this better future goes beyond that. As we unlock the full potential of digital, we must always remember to use technology as a force for larger good, force for social good, force for environment good, and people, planet, profit, and purpose. So we must wield it in a way that will improve lives and environment, and work hard to ensure that a growing digital arena does not result in widening digital divide. This will require strong governance on the use of technologies, fair and ethical rules like fair, ethical, responsible growth, leadership, and artificial intelligence and technology that are generally, and all these which are generally accepted will and implemented well could encourage more people to use and trust technology. Now, so friends, I think the learnings from this session are going to be important. In conclusion, I would say that COVID-19 has disrupted our lives and many livelihoods, but the pandemic has also accelerated the digital revolution. This digital technology can be a new engine that will power the world out of this global recession into the new era of growth and prosperity. On this count, I believe India and India's talent has much to offer. This fully unlocking the potential of digital requires all of us as individuals and companies and countries to work together. I have tried to outline how through collective action we can enable trusted flow of data, strengthen digital connections across borders, and continue to invest in new game changers. As importantly, as we unlock this potential of digital, we must use technology in a way that will improve lives and create a more inclusive digital future. While many of us are joining this conference virtually, I would like to welcome you face-to-face in the future for such a summit and for such deliberations when the situation permits. In the meantime, I wish all of you a great sharing, great learning, great networking, and a great productive conference. Thank you. We have power-packed panel coming up in the first session. Don't go away. So I stay here and wish you good luck and giving me this extra time to set this context, though I had to shorten it because the time was limited and the panel is going to come very soon. Thank you very much and all the best to everyone. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you. I think I had to say something, Vijay.
Sure, you can give the final.
You actually summed it up and you took all the time. There's nothing left, but Should I go ahead or should we just close?
I think since I was smart enough to give you the first chance before, not the last chance, because you have already spoken. So you can kind of wrap this up and then we can start the other session.
Okay. So Mr. Rai, Mr. Barlia, who's left right now, Mr. Chaube, Dr. Seth, and Mr. Desai, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends. I'm very honored and delighted to deliver the closing remarks during the second Delhi Tech Summit 2021, organized by CII in association with JIMS. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Vijay Rai for his enthusiastic and dedicated work. While I see that he put his heart and soul to make this event happen, embarking on the excellent remarks from all our guest speakers today. I'm extremely pleased that the summit will be well attended by various stakeholders ranging from industry, government, institutions, and policymakers to industry practitioners and experts. I hope from rich panel today that it will be filled with insightful content and the participants will be benefited from it. Some of the common themes I noticed were captured today was how we are living in this new post-pandemic world, the transformation that's happened because of that in the digital world, and this new virtual world which enables us to do which we could not imagine. For example, how we are educating people or training people or business meetings and things like that. Of course, the threats of data security and cyber security remain, which have to be taken care of while we move into the virtual world and live in that world for as long as we want to. I think special thanks to Mr. Desai. I think it was very enriching to listen to him. Empowering specially able people was a truly inspiring message and a truly inspiring listening to you, Mr. Desai. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I firmly believe that changes to consumer behavior and business models that emerge in 2020 are set to continue to advance technological adoption, acceptance, and innovation for future. Now is the time to harness the accelerated shift and shape a better future for work and business through technology. Workforce development and equal opportunities must stay in front of mind to ensure that economic development benefits the many, not the few. Through technology, humanity can take care of the biosphere and develop an inclusive circular economy based on sharing, leasing, reusing, and recycling existing materials and products. A cooperative approach enabled by technology will ensure that we meet our own needs without compromising the ability to future generations to meet theirs. Therefore, let me wish us a lot of energy, enthusiasm, shared trust, and resolve on our way forward in achieving a better future for all. Here, I would like to reiterate our appreciation for the support of sponsors to this initiative: JIMS, MapMyIndia, JK Cement, Samtel Avionics, Daikin, Alok Master Batches, CleanFlow India. I hope that many more convinced followers will appear and we will witness many more new exciting undertakings. I would like to again thank CII for organizing this event, and thanks once again.
Thank you very much, Puneet, and for those remarks, ending remarks. I'm very happy that this session went well and everyone was got a chance to represent. Thank you, our chief guest Santulan Chaubeji. We look forward to meeting you once again. Thank you, Pranavji. Thank you, Puneet. Thank you, Vaishali. Thank you, Commander Seth. And thank you everyone who has joined for this inaugural session from all parts of the world and in all time zones. Thank you very much. We now quickly move to ladies and gentlemen, we move to the first technical panel, which is a Power Pack panel. And I request our coordinators to really put all the people in the call, and request everyone to really join and stay tuned. Don't go away because the actual action is about to begin.
Hi Vijay, very good morning.
Hi Rajeshri, good morning. Were you there? Were you got a good chance to be there in the session in the morning?
Yes.
Thank you very much, and good to see you, Sri. Welcome.
Thank you.
We have other gentlemen Suman Das. Is he on? We have Ankit Bhatt. Is he also in the session? Suman is joined. So Suman, a grand welcome, a very, very warm welcome to Suman. Warm welcome, Suman.
Good morning. Can you
Good
hear me?
morning. Yeah. Suman. Yeah, you are there. Suman is the managing director for Eli Lilly Services, and he's a great, passionate leader and a practitioner from the industry, an industry veteran, a thought leader, and all those qualities which you can imagine rolled into one. And mostly a graceful and a very humble and a very, very humane leader. Thank you for joining this session. We have Ankit Bhatt from the Chief Strategy Officer from MapMy India, location-based, map-based services, and I'm sure he's going to talk more about it. Is again a dynamic company which is making waves in the country and creating a lot of impact in the place where they operate.
Hi Vijay, and hi everyone else.
Hi.
Looking forward to this panel.
And we have not the lady in the last, as I said in the first, Rajshri Rao from Rolls-Royce, R2 Data Labs. She heads the Artificial Intelligence and Innovation Center there. And welcome to Rajshri. We have shot a bit of it. We have gone a little ahead of our time, but we will try, and that cushion is always there. As a chairman, I will try to adjust everything within the given time frame. So right now, 11:17, we'll have this session. We'll end the session at maximum 12:10, 12:15. So what I'll straight away do is that, as I said, welcome to all the panelists. I was requested to be orchestrator and moderator for this panel, and it's a great privilege. You know, it's orchestrator means time manager, and orchestrator means interceptor when things go offline or off board sometimes. But as a panel, we have been a very good panel because we have connected before, we had some congruence of ideas, and we co-curated and co-innovated this entire panel. So thank you for gentlemen for joining and giving your inputs. We have 3 to 5 minutes for the key question which I'm going to ask. This is an opening question, and this key question will be mostly, it will be to everyone, so that everyone, and request not to repeat what has been already said. So the key question is to all the global practicing and international leaders who are in this panel. How do you see as global leaders adapt, leverage, or cope with the current situation? So let me give you a background. We know that the adoption of digital technology accelerated overnight during pandemic, and more so during the unprecedented times. We see that the change was quite exponential and has altered the work-life landscape. So as global leaders, could you share how your business vision and strategic roadmap unfolded given this convergence and fusion of intelligent automation, digital technologies, and in many cases, scientific innovation, which applies more to people in the pharma and life sciences space? I will go to first Suman to have your quick remarks on this, and then we'll move to Rajshri and then to Ankit, and then we move ahead.
Okay, thanks, Vijay. Hi, everybody, and good morning. Vijay, if you will permit me, well, first, thanks for having me here. Great to be here in the midst of this very esteemed panel. I just wanted to respond to Pranabji. He mentioned my name, just to assure him that we are already on the path of using or getting into hiring especially able people. We also work with NGOs like Samarthanam, and we are quite advanced down that path. So that was really a very appropriate comment from him, because I know that corporates like us have a huge responsibility, and I wanted to reassure him that we're doing our part. So, COVID-19, I guess reams have been written on it. I think the centrality and the criticality of the healthcare system and healthcare in our lives came home to fore in the last 1.5 years. The healthcare industry basically gives us optimism and hope by providing us solutions which help us overcome life challenges. So it's fundamentally important, right? Without health, there is nothing. When we when we were faced with the situation, I think our first thought was basically how do we continue to get our medicines to patients who depend on them, because that was critical, and also prioritizing the safety and the ability to work from home, which was never done before in a way, which were really the key immediate tasks. It also brought home the fact that the speed of getting healthcare solutions and inclusive healthcare solutions to people was fundamental. And whenever we take a business decision, the key question we ask is, will it make us go faster? And in some ways, and I think it's probably the way that nature operates, digital came to the forefront, and the digital strategy, which is already had started, just accelerated. It was, and the progress in our ability to sort of speed up solutions, and I know, Vijay, you mentioned about vaccines, is one clear example, and there are many others. If I look at vision, vision is something which needs to be aspirational and bold. But what is fundamental is our purpose as a unit, system, or company or country always serves as a guidepost for that vision. From the vision point of things, I would say there are probably about 4 or 5 big ticket items that we look at. We are a service center here in Bangalore. And for us, helping our mothership develop digitally enabled drug plus therapy solutions, personalized patient interventions, demonstrate value for payers and those who pay for our medicines, then developing new patient channels like collecting real-time and actionable data. And also, there's a lot of stuff that goes on in a company just beyond the product value chain. So all these fundamental processes, there's been a huge opportunity for us to reimagine this, and some of that we will talk later in the panel, I guess, using intelligent automation. Wonderful. Now, why are we doing all this? At the end of the day, the whole purpose is try to reduce or counter the disease burden, try and probably deliver, measurably better outcomes so that people actually see the benefit, right? And it's underpinned by best-in-class patient disease and drug insights. The other thing that we actually discovered in this acceleration of digital strategy is how inclusive the solutions can be, because technology actually allows anybody and to access solutions from anywhere in any field. So I believe that as we look down the road, inclusiveness is something that's going to get almost seamless. Stop here and let the others weigh in.
Thank you very much for those crisp comments, and it was very insightful. As we go on from here, I would also like to, I couldn't see Srijit Roy joining earlier. Is he visible? Yeah, Srijit. So I now see you clearly. Welcome to this session. And Srijit is from IBM. He is the senior partner of hybrid cloud transformation, and a great friend, a great colleague, a great practitioner, a great authority on this subject in cloud. And I would like to welcome him as well. So can I come to Srijit straight away? And if you could get my question, I hope I don't need to repeat.
No, so no, thank you, Vijay. So what we did was to change our operating model as part of this pandemic, and we took a holistic view. For us, working from home, as you rightly said, was a key priority, and we were able to achieve that within about 7 to 10 days. But the key thing was, how do we make sure that this pandemic, which had actually stopped or delayed some of the transformation journeys of our clients, God forbid if any such pandemic comes in the future, how do we make sure ourselves and our clients are ready to deal and are resilient to this kind of disruption? So we took what we launched something what we call as dynamic delivery. We have actually patented it, or probably asked for the patent, where we're saying that the operating model change needs to happen at 3 levels. One is at the bottom, which is in the base. Your infrastructure has to be on cloud. On cloud doesn't mean it needs to be on cloud, but it needs to behave like cloud. It is resilient, it is stretchable, it is on demand, and so on and so forth. It's all of your infrastructure in terms of hardware, software, your offices, everything. And you can see how flexible working is now taking shape. The second level on this, what we call as the people layer, is about taking personal accountability, because now in office, you do not have a manager overseeing you. So you need to take personal accountability right from the way when you join to your training to the work which you do, and taking accountability for the delivery on behalf of the company and not being just because you're monitored. That's the second level we spoke about. And the third level we spoke about is the UI phase or the virtual collaboration, as how do we make sure that our fundamental basic infrastructure, on top of it, the layer of the people which is designed for this kind of operating model is able to work in a way with our clients which is completely virtual. So this 9-box model is what we have launched, and we have transformed ourselves.
Wonderful. I think I also got to read, Srijit, if you permit me, Reimagining Service Delivery, the IBM, that white paper, the 4 of you guys have written there, and I could kind of glance through the insights which were there, including the IBM Garage and the next generation hybrid cloud. I think lift, shift, move, manage, customize, all of them, cloud is going to be the next business imperative, and there is no discussion which happens without the cloud today. So thank you very much. I think this transformation is now on the way, and we have on the way, can I request Madam Rajeshri Rao from Rolls-Royce to kind of give her remarks and comments on this question.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you to the esteemed. Again, it's privileged to be part of this esteemed panel. Thank you, audience. Once again, Vijay, thank you so much for the opportunity. I would like to, I would like to start with the, making a point that I'm not going to be talking from my organization perspective, but what I've experienced working with the industry itself. I'll begin with a very different perspective. There were industries which believed I am not going to be disrupted, and woken up to a brutal reality that nobody is indispensable. And what you believed you're always going to exist was not what they actually had to, awaken to. The truth was quite shocking, and that is when they realized they have to transform. They have to adapt, they have to innovate, and innovation is something you have to go ahead, and it's a continuous journey. It's not like I'm innovating once and it's not an invention. Again, there's a huge difference between innovation and invention, which means innovation means you're actually renewing continuously what you are in the field that you are a subject matter expert, or which you hold that special place, right? That's what got stuck. And then the journey of digital transformation really came into existence. People who believe they don't have to digitize also woke up to the reality that I need to adapt to some amount of digital world, I cannot say I'm not going to get into the digital world itself. And I really have to say this, when you made this point about in your earlier session on, Digital India mission, one thing that I'm so proud as an Indian as to, I don't know how many of you have already adapted to the DigiLocker. To me, that's like a transformation, really, where we are going through the paperless, the automation is getting to paperless, where we are actually digitizing, and especially in the government field is phenomenal. That's a commendable journey we have actually begun, and I've used some of these, the adoption, and I've been using some of these tools that has been provided to us. It is incredible. And the next part where it hit a big time is in the supply chain. Created the supply chain industry itself got completely disrupted, and again everybody had to now rethink, like we say, reimagine, reconstruct, restructure their existing business model to adapt to the new normal. And the post-pandemic era is not the same what we were thinking about. I think the digital transformation or the automation depends on which industry, where you fall in, and what technology you want to use, because it begins with your innovation, adoption of emerging technologies, and making it sustainable. This is what I will touch upon, and we'll continue the discussion as we evolve through.
Super. This is a brilliant, brilliant comments given by you. Thank you very much. Moving on to Ankit Bhatt, and requesting him to give his comments and also to share to audience. A lot of people might have heard about MapMyIndia, but can you just also give in 1 line or 2 line that what is the problem you're trying to solve? And I think that will be interesting for people before you give your remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Vijay, and thanks everyone, and for having me on this panel and very excited. I think there'll be a very interesting bunch of opinions, and we'll finally amalgamate all of that into something that not all of us thought before we came onto the panel. And that's the objective of all these panels. So, but interesting opinions already. I'll kind of go off from where Vijay mentioned. Probably talk a bit about what what a company does. But from an opinion perspective of what we've seen through the pandemic, I'll definitely want to take off from where Rajshri mentioned, where how I'd want to kind of give an opinion from what I have personally experienced as we've been interacting with domestic and global companies, and what the questions have come through, how the thinking has changed, how industry is is reacting to consumer changes, and it's kind of fascinating as the last 1 year has been, though it's also been a very tough time for especially in the country, but for industry also it's been very difficult, but also I would think a change that got accelerated in a short span of time. From a MapMyIndia perspective, we're essentially India's largest maps data and technology company, focusing on location and map technology. As you know, location and maps is a pretty deep and complex concept. There are a lot of small things that get knit together to look simple, but they're actually very intricate, and there's almost things that are knit together that that if just one thing kind of moves, and you kind of see it, that you won't find things, or you won't be able to move to reach a place, or the timing won't be correct. So we're essentially the largest in India. We've been doing this for about 20 plus years in India, and we're a true Make in India company. So we've built here. We just filed for our DRHP, so we aspire to go public this year. We're a story of the country, where we essentially built this technology here and scaled it in the country, and we aspire to go global. Focused on the location technology space, and the way we think about maps is maps are not just what we use on our phone or what we just use to go from place A to place B. It's actually the space around us. And that space around us and all the information and all that digital twin is, and all the data that's moving in real time and enriched with more attribute information is what can help us really transform our, our organizations, our consumers, our consumer experiences, and also, how you run different parts of the government. And that's what our vision is, actually, to create India's largest 4D. We call it 4D, time and space maps. So 4-dimensional is essentially 3-dimensional, but things moving in the 3-dimensional space, because you have drones moving in 3-dimensional, you have cars moving in 3-dimensional. So there are so many more things that will be, that will start, moving in the airspace and also terrestrially, from a terrestrial perspective. So that's how we think of it. It's essentially a full phygital representation of the world around us. So, and coming to what we've seen, and pretty interesting, because we do support 5,000 plus customers, and they're all the way from all the car OEMs to companies like Apple, Alexa, Amazon, Flipkart, PhonePe, Paytm, like almost every service that you use. The underlying mapping infrastructure comes from MapMyIndia in India, and we almost touch about 500 million plus lives on a monthly basis. So literally these services are reaching you, but there is this underbelly of services that definitely uses it. And what we've seen is pretty interesting. There were certain phenomena that really struck out to us, and we saw that through different measures and data that came into our systems too. That consumers obviously stopped moving much. That's obvious, but the movement patterns were primarily concentrated to a hyperlocal area, and I'm sure we'll all relate to it. We never ended up traveling more than I would say even 500 meters away from our homes, and that is still kind of we still have the after effects of that. So what happened is brands started asking us that, hey, what is this hyperlocal phenomena? Where are people concentrating? And if people are concentrating, what's around them? And these interesting questions actually help them take decisions on where to be. And so we saw this huge spike in what we call the hyperlocal phenomena. And that hyperlocal phenomena is that the brand wants to know its presence, or brands want to know their presence in different parts of the country. And they want to know what kind of TG is around them and where else can they be. So that was kind of a extreme change, I would think so. And all kinds of brands, whether in CPG, whether in different parts of industry, started asking similar questions. That was one. Second was a huge utilization of the cloud and supporting technologies. So applications that would support building of these applications, and also of other kinds. So essentially, if you're managing a large remote workforce, then you'd want to know their location, and you'd want to see whether they're going from place A to place B, and how do you automate things like visitation and reimbursements. So we saw a lot of that too. It was pretty interesting because a lot of workforce in India is across the country. So we also saw a huge shift to the cloud. Many customers started utilizing the cloud services and started experimenting, which would not have done earlier. So that was kind of our learning and understanding. It was a lot, and obviously after that data came together, people are running machine learning and trying to drive outputs that can be used for the future. That was kind of our learning and perspective.
Sure, I think we can come to. I think you're moving ahead on the digital curve, and I could see that the adoption and leveraging those application technologies through innovation, agile innovation, and all of them. So working in the space of GIS or remote sensing, or all of these are like satellite-based, location-based services. I think all of them become important as we develop 100 more smart cities and as you get more connected. Good to know Make in India story. Good to know you're going global, and wishing you all the best. Thank you for those comments. I would also say that, have you heard, ladies and gentlemen, about this word called DQ and DX and DT? These are some buzzwords which are being used. DT, DX, DQ. And Srijit will also kind of smile at it or laugh at it, that whether it is digital transformation, whether digital experience, whether digital transactions, or DQ is digital quotient. Now, like emotional quotient, intelligence quotient, we have got DQ as a digital quotient. Now people are asking, what is your digital quotient, your digital readiness? If I may ask Suman, that what is your digital readiness to enable enterprises to leapfrog from where they are to, kind of do some game-changing work, and what could be some of these initiatives on your digital readiness curve or digital maturity curve? How do you see that unfolding for your business, and what are some of the key initiatives which you took, one or two, or in your experience, to kind of share with our audience here?
So look, I'll answer this question in a couple of ways. One is, our business is that of a service center. So maybe most of our work that we focus in terms of digital is more on the back end of the value chain. So again, for us, if you take the example of HR processes, that is something very ripe for disruption and something that will change and is changing. But if I talk generally across the industry in terms of as a healthcare professional, what I see is that there are many innovations that can happen and are happening across the value chain, and not necessarily, obviously, I'm not speaking of my organization here. But if you take the example of mobile health, so there are wellness, fitness trackers and nutrition apps and things like that. There are digital therapeutics where you deliver evidence-based therapeutic interventions to patients, which prevent or help the doctor to make better diagnosis. There are health transformation technologies, which are electronic medical record systems. We will no longer have to carry bulky paper all around. Our medical records will be available electronically. There are device sensors, which are both biometric and even beyond that. Personalized healthcare examples, which I think is going to be more and more proliferating as predictive analytics and clinical decision support gets even more active. And then, of course, we know very well, which probably is a little bit more older, the telehealth examples, which has actually now become a full-fledged business model, which we see in the industry. So I think there is a lot of innovation. Again, how a company cherry picks that would depend on a lot of factors which are intrinsic to obviously each company across the board. So that's how I would probably wrap that up.
Thank you, Suman. I think that's very well said, because there are a portfolio of initiatives which you would have to growth opportunity, where people are looking at creating nowadays online yoga classes, to online medicine, to digital consultations, to video consultations. Never heard of, actually. You'll always go to a doctor, and nowadays he can prescribe you there. Even some of these technologies could scan the patients from afar using some of these mediums, app-based services. And now we have got this wearable watches which we are wearing. I have been told my heart rate was 101 a little while ago, and it says that you have been sitting whole night working and not getting sleep, and your heart rate has gone 102. So the devices, the sensors. So one important thing what I am seeing here is what I call sensorization, and the cost of devices also, the sensors also coming down, because I had in my previous avatar worked in manufacturing sensors out of US company which is into smart sensors used for defense and aviation and some of these hyper automated applications. So as we say, can we move to Rajeshri in a way to ask her about what's her view on the initiatives, one or two initiatives which you see in your digital journey, which is doing well?
Thanks, Vijay. I will definitely look from especially the healthcare industry, and this is something I've been researching, and I've been talking quite a bit. The healthcare today, if you look at the technology adoption, and if I even have to say AI, it definitely has the potential to make a huge difference in healthcare. I mean, there are a lot of within not just I'm not talking the hospitals or pharma, literally the whole healthcare industry itself has adopted this technology, and they're making healthcare more affordable and accessible to the people. And today, the one area which has made a significant transformation is, I would say, telemedicine, where some of the diseases that you thought in the earlier, which could not be curable, or you have to go to a different country to get some medical facilities which is not available in that particular country, is no longer the case. Like today, the advanced medical systems or even the medicines or the kind of surgeries is possible through telemedicine. And this has been happening, but it's not gone to the entire public yet, because the adoption is limited into particular facilities or specialty centers or the hospitals. And today, that is what we have to make accessible. But technology has made it possible, which was not the case early on. And that, I will say, definitely, if you take AI, even if you take, I've been studying in China itself, the adoption in different sectors. Healthcare though has been a huge paradigm shift, and thanks to pandemic as well, it has propelled the innovations and transformations quite rapidly. But even if you take agriculture or the other, industries, AI has definitely penetrated, and the digital transformation journey has possible due to AI. And if you look at the other way, in the common man's world, like if you see that, if you think AI is only adapted at a technology level by companies or businesses, I would say that's not the case. Even if you take even our life today, AI has come to our usage in the consumer space through voice assistants. And Alexa or Siri or any other voices, the Google voice assistants, has been a tool now in everybody's life. And that's going to change the way we live, we work, and do things.
Thank you. Thank you. I think some of these are already known to people, that we are at a juncture where the proliferation of these technologies are creating a lot of competitive advantage. The trick is to really understand which all technologies are reliable, which all technologies are also making business sense and a business case for real-time impact to customers. And that's the customer first approach which we're looking at. And every innovation is happening from a customer first and then digital first approach. And in a way, I would like to say, I'll come back to you, Rajshri, on the sustainable technology side, because that's also one of your passion areas. And we are also talking about scaling growth. Now, I'll come to Srijit, because cloud is a great enabler for scaling growth. And there are a lot of nuances. A lot of people are differently placed in their journeys. And a lot of people are not ready yet to, and they're scared also to understand what will happen to the data, whether I will be able to be in my control or my data will be secure or not. And they think cloud is something like a nightmare for them. Many of the people are not yet migrated to cloud. What is your thought on the reimagining the way business is being done through migrating to cloud and shifting to cloud and be in control of a business and be yet affordable and deliver the impact on business, the customer experience to the end customer? Over to you.
So Vijay, you absolutely ended with the right word, which is the customer. Either it's the experience or it is the value we bring to the end client. So as long as we look at cloud as a solution to a customer's requirement, then all these discussions about whether data or whether it is something new which will get me to lose control and so on and so forth, whether it's public cloud or private cloud, all those, there are so many options available today to mitigate each of those data points, each of those questions, that we currently are not looking at that as a deterrent. We go back, and again, I'm not talking about my company, is we go back and say that as long as tell us your business problem. Don't talk about cloud. We might go back and say cloud is not required. I'm just not saying. But tell us your business problem, and then we are seeing this more as a data problem. And there are 7 key, in my head, the way I look at this problem, there are 7 key changes which have enabled this whole shift. The first is, and we spoke about it a lot just now, is around recording. We have this mobile devices, which is the front end, which is now able to, you spoke a lot about it, is able to capture the data or record the data. The second is, how do we capture the data? That's where new technologies, again, we spoke about, is technologies like edge is coming. Once you have captured the data, third stage is what you transmit the data. And that's where new technologies like 5G is coming, and without that, you won't be able to get these n number of data. The fourth is, once you do this, you need to integrate this and bring it together. There are so many technologies, either you talk about data lake, or you talk about data fabric, or you talk about blockchain. There are tons of stuff. Once you bring it to, you're able to integrate, then it becomes something which is focused towards the customer's problem. Once you have done that, the fifth step is around analyze. And that's where, again, we spoke about the AI part. The AI engine then sits on this data and is able to take the right decisions, which again should be directed towards the client's problem. Once you have done that, the sixth step is to execute. That's where tons of automation is coming in. And this automation then is actually started with the data and is executing at times 60, 70, 80% of the task, which my AI engine is now telling me. The last thing about all of this, you cannot do it at scale unless you are in a cloud environment, be it hybrid multi-cloud and so on and so forth. So hybrid multi-cloud is a platform which starts with the client's problem and is enabled by all these technologies. And to us, cloud brings all of this together and solves the problem. So if we look at it from a technology, yes, there'll be many questions. So that's my personal point of view.
Yeah, wonderful. I think it is customer first, digital first, and cloud enabled, which is, I have known and I have read about the IBM Garage methodology, which is another interesting platform and a methodology which is used to really provide that seamless customer experience maybe we'd like to touch upon that. A lot of people do not know what is garage actually.
Yeah, so just I'll spend 10 seconds. I know you brought it twice because garage for us is so inherent. We don't even think it is something we all. So garage is about co-create and co-execute, collaborate. We bring in one sentence, a garage is a model by which I start with a proof of concept by bringing in a multidisciplinary team in one room, physically in one room. Today we are doing it virtually, and then create a POC, prove that with the right set of enablement and right set of delegation, so that the decisions are taken, and then you scale. We have been doing that for now at least multiple years by using the methodology, be it cloud, be it digital, or whatever you may call it. But thanks for bringing it up.
So actually, garage is a garage like a startup, no, isn't it?
Yes.
And I heard your global CTO talking about who's the architect of this garage methodology.
Yes.
And I heard his talk and his research and his papers, whatever I could get through. I read a lot, so I thought maybe let me go through. Garage methodology is nothing great, but garage is like a startup, co-creating, right? And collecting all your problems and pain areas and then innovating at that to really scale your, is it?
At 10x the speed.
At 10x the speed.
You have to give. A garage will not be successful if you don't have two things. First of all, you need to bring in the multidisciplinary team.
Right.
And secondly, you need to give that garage a delegation to take the right decisions. If you use the same operating model, it won't work.
Yeah. So both, so the public cloud architecture and the hybrid cloud architecture. So both of them have the same methodology, or?
Garage is a ways of working. Whether it is multi-cloud or public, or it is public cloud or private cloud, doesn't matter.
So that's a very great example of using innovative technologies and using some of these methodologies and tools to really scale business. So that's what the theme of our conference and summit also, scaling business. And this helps to not do 10% growth, but as you said, 10x growth, which is quantum growth, as well as exponential growth through using these kind of applications, which are path breaking. Thank you for kind of staying on that point of discussion, and your POV is very well taken. So Ankit, you have already started giving some use cases about in the beginning itself. I was coming to one or two use cases which could be game changer, or which could be super innovators, or what I call hyperscalers in a way, right? The hype cycle of technology is that, there are so many technologies. There's a hype, and there is, again, we need to understand which technologies really work for what. So how do you select those technologies and applications? And how do you know that, how do you get wise on that, which is going to work for you? What is your architecture? How do you really get to decode that? And the latest use case in that, what you did was something very phenomenal, which you did.
Thanks a lot, Vijay. So I think the definition of where and what to use starts primarily from what audience and where we're trying to address, and also what's the adoption from that standpoint. Very interestingly, if we, a lot of us will think that, let's say we use a map on our phone and we think that it's all omnipresent, everyone uses it. But let's bear in mind that the number of two-wheelers in our country are 10 times more in volume than the actual cars that probably, people on this panel do use and drive. So the cars on the road could be about 30 million or more, but the bikes and the scooters and all the two-wheelers combined are about 300 million or two. I guess that's the approximate number.
Yeah.
If you think of that problem, those two-wheelers are also, I'm just taking an analogy just to tell you how, to address the question that you mentioned. If you think of that, there are these 250, 300 million two-wheelers, and no one really has, and they're all mid to low cost, because that's what, that's where the country is at right now. And if you think about it, no one really has a good navigational experience on that. Like, you don't really have, some of them have like something connected on a digital cluster, but those are just like a very tiny sliver because they're too expensive. So mass market, no one really right now drives a two-wheeler and is able to know, where to go. So that's an example of, firstly, there is a problem and you can solve it. And the only problem that's being solved is for, 20, 30 million Indians, which is which is not even a large percentage of the entire population. So I think the first is what the problem is. So I think there is a big problem. Can it be solved technologically? Definitely it can. Maybe the ways it represents itself changes. So we are definitely working on ways in which, hundreds of millions of Indians can experience navigation, whether it be through visual cues, audio cues, whatever that be, right? But it's truly for a company like us to innovate and bring that to more and more people. So one is the need and the problem, and second is also what is the adoption. So a lot of I truly think right now we're literally in this huge transformation journey of the country itself, where a lot of the technologies that we used in in the larger cities will really start getting used en masse across all the 7,500 cities and towns in India, and hopefully to the rural markets also. And what I mean by those technologies are things arriving in time, knowing what time it's going to reach. That's a use case, right? Like we in the cities have gotten spoiled by this behavior where we, if there's a consumer service that, and all of us will relate to it, as a consumer service that is supposed to reach you at 6:30, and at 6:25, if you don't know where the person is, or he doesn't give you a call, or you don't see a link of him reaching you, like a map or something of that sort, you think the service is subpar, right? Like you just get this sense of anxiety. So these are some technologies that we've gotten used to, but I think it's just a very small part of India, but it's going to start going more, like wide scale, like from the 50 million max usage to like the 500 million users, all these technologies. So I think it's very important to keep that in mind. So from that perspective, is definitely something that's going to go wide, like wider and wider in a country like India. So to answer your question, there are two things. One is if there's a problem and you can solve it, and second thing is if there's a wave of adoption which is happening right now, how do you kind of make sure that you are meeting the needs of the end consumers, which also means that prices and all of that needs to meet the market. That's something that we also think deeply, because we do possess a lot of this extremely valuable technology for every business. Every business wants to know, how do I expand? How do I run the company? I have 10 people. I'm a small shop. How do I monitor these 10 people? Are they going to these places or not? How much do I reimburse them? It's simple questions for a business. And these tools need to be ubiquitous, and everyone needs access to them. And that's what we core, kind of focus on, that how do we provide these tools to almost every business in the country.
Right.
And that's where I would say a lot of the thinking kind of runs through, that how do you make all of this accessible to the cloud. Wonderful. To anyone who's, who might be the next Sam Walton of India, right? So yes. You want to make that technology available, but I think how do you make that available at scale and at cost? And India especially, all of us will say that to reach wide scale distribution in India, cost is a huge factor. And how do you meet that market need? So I think that's my 2 cents on that, Vijay.
Thank you. I'm sure data privacy and security issues and cyber issues remain as a big risk factor also. I'm sure those we will be talking if time permits, but these are the questions which will be definitely asked by the audience and public at large around the world. So I'm not touching on that question. I'm expecting that question will come from the audience. And also we know that today, whatever digital transformation we may talk, we also are exposed to greater risks. And that's where we are at an inflection point today. And therefore, whether it is change or transformation at the point of need, or at the point of care, or at the point of customer experience, be it software, hardware, services, as Eli Lilly is into services, the digital, the footprint from the manufacturing to the customer, that time is getting reduced. And everybody wants to run fast and scale. And scaling is not just scaling because you want to scale as a vision and a mission of an organization, but scaling sustainably. One, that you need to run the business, transform the business, innovate and manage, and then again run, because you have continuous innovations happening. But most important issue around the world globally at all forums, be it World Economic Forum, be it United Nations, be it the League of Nations, is sustainable technologies. How do we see the data centers are green, less of carbon emission is there, less of all kinds of procurement of raw materials to procurement to production, the responsible growth, responsible production, all of them are becoming big issues, and there has to be disclosures on those in the annual reports. I'm sure there people are doing it, but there is a lot of legroom to do a lot of improvements and innovations in that space, and there are big question marks on that because everybody is running on and they're not looking at what we call consciously, adopting those or innovating on those spaces. So inclusive growth, sustainable growth, responsible growth, all of them becoming key challenges. How do you view as a leader? Because most of the leaders are to be championing this change into their entire DNAs and ecosystems. How do we see sustainable growth becoming a part of the DNA of the organization, and where we are able to really track, measure, and report much more transparently, because trust and transparency going to be the big mover for businesses to sustain in the time to come. So quick comments from Suman, and then from Suman to Rajeshri.
I can give you my personal view. The way I look at it is that when you talk of anything at scale, the key raw material for us is talent, right? And I think as we accelerate down this path, we have to have that catchment pool of talent who are ready to take the leap forward. And I think the government has done a fantastic job in terms of the National Skilling Mission and all the other initiatives it has taken. NASSCOM is doing a great job. I think those are that to me is underpins really how we can sustain growth and grow at scale. Of course, then that's going to feed into whatever organizational machinery it comes into. But to me, that's really the fundamental linchpin, and that's going to determine really how we succeed, how we grow, and how we scale.
Yeah, thank you very much for this one, Suman. And now let me come to Rajeshri from Rolls-Royce. What's your point of view, and what's your practical ideas on this?
Thanks, Vijay. It's a fantastic question, and I can go at I can take over this entire conference having to discuss the sustainability, but I will in the constraint of time, I'm just going to give a couple of my own research.
We'll do another summit around all of these issues, but
yes.
I think let me touch upon, because this is a first panel, and in the beginning we need to set the
I know.
tone,
So
right?
quickly, 2 cents on what I've been researching and going through. See, when you say sustainability, when I've gotten into this field, and I'm also the Global Director General for Sustainable Development Goals, part of the industry body for GCPIT. So working with different countries and also trying to understand what is sustainability actually, and I'll give a very simple example. Today, sustainable innovation is a key element, but if you don't understand what you're innovating or what you're developing is sustainable or not, then it's going to be a huge challenge. And I'll just give a very simple case study. I don't know if everybody knows, but this is one thing that I've been asking a lot of people. See, today we live and thrive on whether it is our phone, computers. We are evolving in the world of technology way too much than what we were before. So technology drives our life today. But today, thanks to computers, because if not for computer and this technology, we will not be having this virtual conference. But at the same time, if you say sustainable development, I will bring this case study, which I've been researching on. One is on what goes behind developing the silicon chips. Today, the silicon chips, we were being given to understand that it is developed using the sand, but sand has impurities. So silicon chips is not developed using sand, but it is developed using a high quality quartz. They take a piece of high quality quartz, which is again mined, which is a natural resource, along with a piece of carbon. So both these components are burnt at a 1800 degree. And what comes out of that is the silicon chip. So the carbon dioxide evaporates, and what remains with you is that carbon itself, which is again not sustainable. We are talking about going ahead with a going carbon-free world, but Instead, we are still having carbon with us, whether it is in our phone, computers, or cars. So the question is to the industry: when we develop something, how do we ensure that we have an alternate way of coming up with the same chip with some other component, rather than living with something which is going to harm to the environment and us. So that's what I believe, that today everybody has to take it as a personal challenge. It's not just an organization, right? It have to begin with me. So most important is knowledge, and today I don't see that is being taken into account, because we don't have this understanding. And once we have this understanding, how can we all come together to address this bigger problem, which is just not possible by me alone?
Wonderful. I think so. How do you eat the elephant, Srijit? 140 characters.
So we look. I completely agree with her. And Rajshri, it was a brilliant the way you articulated it. For us, sustainability has very two clear supply chains, and Rajshri spoke about the supply chain, which is at the front end. But we, from an IT side, we work at the back end behind that, right? We are behind the data center and backwards. There has been some research where I don't know how true it is, but that up to 12% of total power consumption is going to be in data centers. That's huge. That's huge. And Rajshri is already nodding. So if I'm able to even get 1% of that data center down, that knowledge, that's huge impact on sustainability. So what we are working on is, how do I make my architecture? How do I make my coding? How do I make my utilization of or where I keep the data, so on and so forth? There are multiple facets of this. How do I enable the business to use less amount of resources from a technology perspective, and hence impacting that 12%? That's where we are focusing on. It's the hidden supply chain. Nobody will see it until unless we start designing it, designing the software, designing the architecture, designing the data center in a way which consumes less energy. So that's the alternate view to Rajshri.
I know. Sorry to interrupt. I want to add one very important point.
No, just I'm coming to Rajshri. Just let me close this loop part. Srijit, thank you. This is a very important part. This entire value chain and supply chain. And I know that you speak about design thinking, which I have not touched at all. And because we'll talk about design thinking, because it has to right from the design stage. The way you think, the way you look at addressing the problems, how do you responsibly, ethically, sustainably do it right from the design stage? So before we have any one line on that, any secret sauce, how do you do it, design thinking, Srijit?
So design thinking, again, is a way by which we first start with the customer and we create personas. And so the easiest way to take an example is, 5 years ago, I come from the industry 25 years. So for me, I sit with my internal IT department. I take the functional specs, start coding, do the testing, and then I take it to the customer. Design thinking is exactly opposite. I start with the persona, actually create multiple personas, and then I say, what do those personas need? From a millennial persona for a banking customer, for example, will be very different for me, what I seek from a bank. So how do I create those multiple personas, then work backwards into the functional requirement, then the technical requirements, and then I start coding. So that's the fundamental difference.
Wonderful. I think you have a lot of statistics on design thinking also that proves a lot of these things, but we'll not go into statistics because a lot of statistics can be a little mundane right now. But going back to Ankit, you have any one-liner quick comment on sustainable technology? You agree, disagree, or you have a way of thinking and point of view on this?
Yeah, so
Ankit?
Vijay, I think,
and then
can you hear me?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I think I mean, I'm not an expert on this topic, but I think Rajshri anyways had and Mr. Roy also had a lot of depth to talk about this. But essentially, from our perspective, the technology can be, I mean, at least the way I look at how technology is moving for the country would be primarily from a perspective whether, because technology can go either ways. Like there can be, and I look at it more from a human perspective and how is it affecting us. So though it has, and that's what I think should be the narrative, where there is technology that gets utilized in ways where, you can't really control it. Yeah. And there is technology that's used in our businesses or something where it's phenomenal productivity and, definitely there is economic output and people are doing phenomenally well. I think it uplifts society, people are earning money, all of that. So there's this dichotomy that lies, and it's very difficult to say what kind of works, what does not. But my firm opinion here is that it's high time in this industry, especially in the tech industry, because I've only been in this industry, that there are, the lawless land becomes, regulated now. I think it's very high time, because what's happening is, and also you guys will agree that during the pandemic, a lot of what the sector within the tech industry that really boomed or suddenly sprung. I mean, overall the sector did really well was healthcare. Healthcare really had an enormous boom.
So what's your message on this?
So my message is really simple. I think we should have more so that consumers can have more trust on all the technologies that we use. I think that's the main trust deficit, and if there is a larger power that comes in.
So I think I was looking for something like this, some 2-3 things. So Mahatma Gandhi used to talk about 2T test. 2T test was like, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that mindset, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam mindset we have to endure. And also 2T is trust and transparency. People trust, and you have to work transparently and ethically. Rajshri, your 1 or 2 lines on your punch points on this?
See, for me, one is technology has to become inclusive. It is not exclusive. The second aspect is that we need to make this world a better place. And for making this world a better place, its innovation doesn't directly translate to dollar values. Innovation is first you got to give and innovate. Come up with something which is beyond your own lifespan as well. It's not a near term or short term, and which is going to help the planet, the future generation benefit. And at the same time, the business will have its own, how we will be able to enable better productivity, efficiency, cost reduction, and value and impact to the business and the customer, most important, where this whole world becomes a better place. And that's what we all have to champion and channel.
Super. I think that's a very wonderful way to look at scaling growth sustainably through innovation and creating innovation ecosystems and creating the right culture and mindset within the organization. Suman was very a great believer of creating innovation cultures and system within the company. Because innovation is going to be the driver for creating new products, new services, creating experiences, and architecting that kind of framework and culture is very important within the organization, and rest all follows. Any 140 characters answer, or maybe a 1 minute quick reply to this? I know it's a loaded subject, but just
I mean, I think again, I'm not an expert. From my perspective, I guess everything probably demands innovation because of the amount of technology, information proliferation we have. We talked about sustainability. It's a very broad subject, and as Rajshri very eloquently said, covers many different pillars. For us, obviously, the business itself is innovation for us. I mean, we are discovering life-saving medicines. But if you look at it from a human point of view, or we look at it from a basic individual point of view, we have to think of a way which is different, but a way which is safe, sustainable, and also sort of make sure that we are not really taking away from nature. Instead, the best way is are we giving back to it.
Super. I think that's a very, very powerful statement, that we must replenish. We must not just be users. We must replenish. And responsible leadership goes much way beyond. I've heard Paul Pullman and many other people from Unilever. They have integrated this thinking into the DNA of the entire supply chain and value chain. And there are an enormous number of case studies. because I work with the United Nations on sustainable development, one of the green ambassadors. I've worked on environment, healthcare, and all other things. So I realized that how much of it goes into it in terms of advocacy, in terms of education, in terms of capacity building, in terms of own development mindsets, which you need to understand, inclusive mindsets in the organization. And I'm sure scaling growth will have all these levers and vectors in place in the future. It cannot be just one-sided. And because of this, the problems will also be there. So one quick problem and one or two quick risks or problems you see going ahead that needs to be attended to by the industry, by the professionals. And of course, opportunities are huge, but one or two risk areas, pain areas, which we need to really address as a whole industry. And how do you see the digital future? What is your digital future in your language? Maybe one or two words or remarks. As we stand here, how do you see yourself 1 or 2 years down the line? What's the future you envision? Right from Srijit now.
So I would say 2 words. It will be a far more interconnected world, on which will be platform driven. Doesn't matter what platform. It could be industry platform. It could be a cloud platform. It could be anything. Okay. But it will be a platform and data driven industry future.
Wonderful. Coming back to Rajshri.
I would envision a world where we need to take the work to education, and most important is influence the aspect of how to learning to learn in the right manner, and then creating a problem-solving generation where we create leaders and not somebody where we are just there as worker class, or as we just are doing things, but we have to create the future leaders of our world.
I think, Rajshri, you should also enlighten the entire industry on, not today because it will take a lot of time, about your wisdom and practice with the Bhagavad Gita, with the Lord Shri Krishna. Because, in terms of my knowledge and my practice, as I understand, when you read Bhagavad Gita, the greatest epic, the greatest work ever, the dialogue between the Arjuna and the Shri Krishna, you have all the answers to leadership, all the answers to all the problems of the world. And that dialogue must be there. The continuous curiosity, the search for doing things better, responsibly, must be on. You use dharma, karma, and spirituality both, and science, and data, and all of them to really create. So that intersection of dharma, karma, and technology will be a very great stuff to hear from you next. I'm sure Suman, Ankit, and all of them, IBM would be very happy to invite. She is a great authority on some of these subjects, and she is doing some grassroots level work, creating impact, and has a vision forward to change the societies and the world for better, redefining our future, reimagining the future in a different way. Maybe we will do a special session with you and a special interview with you, and maybe we'll get some different panels, how you use dharma, karma technology, and how you do not just jugaad technology, but those soft power, those soft skills, as Suman mentioned. It is not easy. The human augmented, intelligence and human augmented artificial intelligence, which we talk. Because I work in the space of artificial intelligence and all the deep technologies, so I can speak number of hours on human augmented intelligence and other things. But I think, which is rightly said. So I just trying to provoke you for another session, but this will be limited to the time. So Ankit, your 2 words and the digital future. Problems or the digital future, whatever way you say.
So Vijay, my opinion still lies on the fact that the future is incredibly bright, and most of the transformation that will come in the country and the growth from what our PM has set the vision as a $5 trillion economy, most of that majority of that growth will come through technical innovation and technology. But one thing that I definitely want to advocate for is more more rules and regulations on how that data is governed, especially consumer data, because as data of healthcare and our health also goes out there, and for the ecosystem to also grow, I think there needs to be governance on who owns my information or your information. And if there is a way, it's extremely difficult, but if there is a way to put in a process to all this madness. I think the ecosystem will grow sustainably. And
thank you. Today is a Vishwakarma Day, and I would like to also say that Vishwakarma is that the creator of the universe. And manufacturing companies, all companies, auto companies, they celebrate this in India, and they really invoke the god Vishwakarma to give them. They put their tools and equipment. So this is a very pious day for all of us in the industry, and I'm sure many of us could relate to Lord Vishwakarma and his contribution to the world. And let me tell you, if you talk about Lord, and if you talk about whether it is Shiva or Krishna or any other thing, I'm not going to religious things, but there is a supreme power, the creator of this universe and the creator of this technology called human beings. Look at this human machine, the digital future. Forget about the digital future. Human machines work so seamlessly. And if we really take care of this, if we nurture that, if we maintain that properly, and if we can really innovate, if we can think, so much of wonders we can do. Look at the weather systems. Look at the natural systems, how they have been made by the superpower, the people in thousands of years before this technology was there. You have sun, you have rain, you have seasons, you have everything. The only problem which is there today is that it is the human beings' interference, the way we live and work, the way we learn, live and work. If itself it cannot be reimagined, we can't see a brighter future ahead. Technologies will come and go, but the existence of human beings as the biggest creation of the world on this earth is still there, will still remain. I don't know whether we will have chips inside embedded in our brain, or we will have temperature controlled clothes or whatever it is. But I think there is a time when we are moving into a super age where human ingenuity and technological innovation both are kind of racing with each other. It's high time that we create that balance for ethical, responsible, and sustainable growth, using all the technology which we have in mind. Any final word from all of you? Any one word, any message before we go to any questions which we have? 1, 2, 3. Srijit.
No,
final
I'm good.
Word. Okay,
I'm good.
Suman.
Yeah, I'm good too.
Yeah, any message, any word? Ankit.
No, I think my last, what I said, trust and transparency.
Wonderful. Anything,
That's
Rajshri?
I'll say thank you for that opportunity, more than happy to do. But the one word I will say 4 words, which is knowledge, duty, and love and devotion. That is the path we have.
Wonderful. With that, I am happy to conclude this session. It was such a great pleasure meeting all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Srijit, Suman, Ankit, Rajashri, I would have loved to have a dialogue with you in conversation further for many more minutes, but this session has been so beautiful, isn't it? It was so real, we went from real tech to sublime world, and we transitioned from that sublime world so nicely, and it gives us a very good feeling. And I am so encouraged and motivated to hear from all of you. Now, can we jump into questions? If there is any question, the panel is waiting, and the question should be only in 140 characters. The answer should be also in equally about 70 characters. Over to the audience. Any question? I have some questions which I would like to say. Kalpesh Kumar is asking, dear sir, why there is no policy for reservation in promotion for the Divyangjan in Gujarat government? From Kalpesh Kumar, Vadodara, Gujarat. This question was to Pranavji, so we will not kind of be able to take this, but I think there are other questions. If there are other questions, please.
Mr. Rai, there was a question which was asked regarding, conjoining of an offline and online class. Right. So I privately answered that to the person. But anyway, for general information, even using a Zoom platform, if you have the right digital setup with sensitive mics and speakers, you have a smart board in class. So they can be a physical classroom and others can join in online. So you have to have sensitive mics, otherwise the teacher has to be very near the mic. So it's possible to have, simultaneously to have an online and an offline class.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I think wonderful. I think people are already so enlightened because they want to break for tea, and we continue for the next session, which will be moderated by our friend Saurabh Rai from Tech Mahindra, who is the Global Head of Data Analytics and Strategic Initiatives. We have another panel coming up on innovative tools, technologies, and best practices for scaling growth. And so if there are no questions, Pallavi and Vaishali, can we move to the next panel straight away? And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been awesome, and look forward to joining you once again.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, CII. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
So we can start the next session, please.
So, hi everyone. This is Saurabh, and I'm joined here by my two very esteemed colleagues and friends, Ashish Ranjan and Ashish Chandra. So let me introduce my colleagues first and co-panelists, and then we move to my introduction. But Ashish is Chief Digital Officer for National Engineering Industries